Hi, so I'm working on a workbook, Reading the Marseille Tarot by J.M. David. And it's a phenomenal book. And one of the things that I know for me that I get a lot more out of something when I'm teaching. So I wanted to just start doing the videos of the chapters that I've gone through and where I'm at. And by this point, I'm even thinking about just doing it chapter by chapter, because I found that there are other people that I got in contact with. They contacted me that are also working on this same workbook. So I thought this would be a good way for me to lock in the information and to also share with other people what I'm learning through this book. It says the Marseille Tarot. So, like a lot of people, I started out with the Rider-Waite, and you learn all the keywords and things like that. The reason I drifted into the Marseille Tarot is so that I could move beyond the keywords. I'm more of an intuitive reader, and I find that when I went to the Marseille deck, it forced me to learn a new style. And so that's why I'm going through this book. And I would suggest it for anybody, just if you're looking to go to a new level, something different, something more, to challenge yourself. So currently I am on, what chapter is this? I am now on chapter 18. I did 2 other videos to kind of go through what I had already learned previously, because I had stopped doing this book. I was the musical director for a play for King Lear, and that took all my time. Took, a few months to be able to get everything ready for that. So I jumped back in and I did a couple other videos as a brief review of where I was at so I could catch back up, get my mindset back in. So now I'm on this chapter 18, and it's called About Readings, the Eschatological and Metaphysics. Eschatology. I hardly use that in a sentence every day, right? Eschatology. The part of theology concerned with death, judgment, and the final destiny of the soul and humankind is the notes that I've put in here. And I tell you what, I'm just going to switch here so that we can share this together, kind of like. So again, eschatology and metaphysics, division of philosophy that's concerned with the fundamental nature of reality and being, and that includes ontology, cosmology, and often epistemology, the study of nature and grounds of knowledge. So a lot of times I will, whether I know a word or not, you're going to find in here that I'm going to look it up just to see the different context. Because a lot of times I think I know something and it turns out I don't, right? So as he's going in, and I'm just going to go through the highlights of this book, but I'll tell you the main thing about this chapter is, when doing a reading, are we considering different cultures? We have our worldview, but are we considering the worldviews of others as we are doing these readings? Are we seeing this through just one single lens? And again, that's that part of going beyond just learning keywords, beyond going, doing what we've always done, when we get to a particular level. And for me, it's how can I break from that level to learn different considerations for the person that's sitting across from me. So for this, he's explaining as far as what this chapter is about, but also quite held by users. Some of the considerations on which I shall focus this week include how the worldview one holds will not only have ramifications for the manner in which we are able to see into the images presented to us, but also in the context of a reading, how either a fair compatibility of understanding between the reader and the readee is required, or alternatively, the need to couch the narrative in a manner that can be more easily considered from worldviews other than our own. Okay? So he goes on to give a reading example so that he can give us an idea of the different views that we may want to consider. So the views that he's actually talking about that we want to consider, let me see, where was that? So we are considering, the secular, the materialistic physicalities, physicalist worldview. He goes in here somewhere about the Judeo-Christian view and the Hindu-Buddhist view. So looking at the different worldviews that are commonplace, and the materialistic is maybe somebody who's an atheist, because I don't go too much into the esoteric when I'm doing a reading. I look more at, sometimes I see a reading as a Rorschach test, where it's triggering thoughts, images, and symbology, a universal symbology that all of a sudden awakes a different area in somebody's mind. So readers can be atheist or agnostic readers, and you can read for an atheist or an agnostic, which on the forums there's a lot of conversations about how can an atheist be a reader. And as you move forward again, it's like you can absolutely see how that can be. So he goes in here, and in the reading he gives us one view. He's saying, so briefly recapitulate this overall reading. We have an individual who sought some items for which he intruded into an area that was not his domain, and being caught out was consequently self-humiliated for doing so. He hangs his head in shame. And then in this book we talk about the description above gives no explanation as to why or how the person was found out, simply that he, as I've used a masculine pronoun thus far for the individual concerned, entered, was found out, and suffered shame. So we have that view, and he's explaining, what he initially, how he resolved the deck, the three cards initially. Then we go in, I've neither provided the reading in terms of psychological or emotive terms, nor spiritually based ones. For example, the two brief statements that follow may have been spoken in light of the above by two different individuals, seeing in the reading the same as I have described. So what he's given us is contrasting worldviews. So the other view is the person. And this is based on the paragraph I had read above. The person, having been found out, seeking to steal those items, was overwhelmed with remorse at both his action and his public humiliation. He felt wounded and somewhat demoralized at the projected sense that his personal integrity was deemed to have suffered, as contrasted to the nearly karmic consequences of his being found out was perhaps a blessing from his spiritual carers, who saw that by suffering the humiliation he nonetheless had sufficient fortitude that thus such action would not be left as seeds to be resolved in future lives. So I'd shown the cards, but here, let me bounce back here. So the cards that we're reflecting here is the Hangman, the Three of Swords, and Justice. So he's using these with a broad example to show different kind of views that each person would have, whether it's the karmic view that we just had, and et cetera, et cetera. So as he goes on, at least in the manner in which I strove to present it, the speaker, i.e. my worldview, invisible to the reader, also leaves such an embellishment open to the listener. And so that was the initial one where, personally, it's kind of dry to me, and it's very specific. So I know I have a note in here that talks about making a connection, eye contact when appropriate, external clues, and responses. So, he's just given an example here, the bulb that was dry. And of course, we need to take our own views and the person in front of us, the cues from them. So, going on with it. By contrast, the other two direct the listener towards, on the one hand, a psychophysiological interpretation, the one that may, of course, be quite adequate, and on the other, considerations of a trans-life spiritual reality, more of that karmic thing, which, of course, may again be entirely apt. In the specific context of the reading at hand, the person for whom the reading is intended remains of paramount importance, as does also the integrity of the reader. So just in short, he gave different ways of viewing the same reading, which later on will go on, is that there's exercises that say, take into consideration. So he goes in, talks more about the worldview in the secular age. It was not for another century following the creation of the noble that some of the which was 1650s, I think it was. I should actually know that right off the top of my head, right? 1659. So it was not for another century following the creation of the noble that some of the quite appalling proofs by demonstration that animals were soulless, carried out in quite horrendous ways by Descartes and others, opened the way for a more secular, materialistic, and physicalistic worldviews. Even for those involved in such research, of course, there was no question that at least humans were endowed with a spiritual substance or essence. So, okay. So it's how we started evolving our different views from when the noble was first created. And then he goes on, talks about the unique gestalt or way of apprehending, which is far more than an ideology that may drive one to a particular action. Review the permeation of and by such metaphysical and eschatological views overshadows and underpins both thought and narrative, including our own. So this is like really heavy kind of stuff that I'm reading here. And it's not like reading Harry Potter. It's and my suggestion is with this particular book, I would say, because a lot of people get this, I've seen, and then kind of put it away because, this is not geared towards a basic level. This I have to do a lot of research to understand what he's talking about with a lot of these things, because he's talking a lot of philosophy, and I never took philosophy that went into the depth of what he goes into. So the thing about doing books like this is the willingness to learn. And that's the importance, I think, of moving to the next level with the tarot for me, is a drive to learn, to be able to see with different views, which means looking up things. Like I look up gestalt because I've heard that word before, but, do I really know what that word means? So when he talks about gestalt, or a way of apprehending, a way of understanding an organized whole that is perceived as more than its sum or its parts. So it's just a way to understand the whole of something. And I love words anyway, which is why as I mentioned before, I was doing a Shakespeare play. I've done 8 Shakespeare plays and love them. Waltonshag or Waltonschick. We go into another, and I'm going to show you this so that you can see the spelling here, because he goes into these different philosophies here, which is a particular philosophy, worldview, or view of life, the worldview of an individual or group. And so again, that kind of is just a definition of a couple words that are explaining what we're doing here, which is trying to learn how to understand different cultures. So he goes into, irrespective of our personal and maybe even political and religious rapport with each other, let's consider these exemplars. The Judeo-Christian view posits a spiritual realm filled with a myriad spiritual beings, whether these are considered as extensions of the Supreme Being or as independent is not so important for the characterization. Okay, so what he's saying there, Judeo-Christian point of view, spiritual realm filled with spiritual beings, angels, saints, which are considered extensions of the Supreme Being or independent. So, yeah, he's a challenge. J.M. David, it's a challenging read. And one, again, where I've had to go through the chapter a couple times to just bring it down to my level. So, in addition, there are two other characteristics that are essentially important with the Judeo-Christian view. The concept of a Messiah, or an anointed, and that of the world and its evolution arising out of a creative fiat from the spiritual realm. Okay, so there's the Judeo-Christian. And then with some similarities to the above, Hindu-Buddhist views consider that the world is in essence something other than its appearance, that we traverse it in a limited consciousness until liberated by a wakefulness. Again, these are just really short definitions, and he explains that it's like, he's not going into a lot of definition. But this is just so that we can comprehend as we go through that he's got some examples to work through later on. And then he talks about specifically the terms of the eschatological view. The three exemplars call to mind vastly differing views. The first, the Judeo-Christian, a clear, unequivocal, ongoing existence of the person going to another location once you have passed. And the second, the Hindu-Buddhist, there's generally a sense of mindfulness that sees the individual as a drop within a vast ocean. So as you passed on, you're just going back to the vast ocean. You are becoming part of that whole consciousness again, with a lot of other details, right? And then he also talks about the psychophysicalist, which I had never heard of a psychophysicalist. And essentially, he says the person is described as existing between the portals of birth and death, outside of which the person is not. Or he could have just said an atheist, somebody who believes you're born at this point, you die at this point, and anything outside of those points, you don't exist. We are all made of stardust. And once we pass, we just go back to that. But again, reading this really makes me shift my mindset, because this is not the type of tarot book. I got dozens. I've read dozens of books multiple times on the tarot, and this one really makes my brain hurt in a good way. So anyway, we're talking about those three, whether atheist, Judeo-Christian, Hindu-Buddhist, or the Judeo-Christian. Great. So the quest for meaning and plenitude, what has at times been called the quest for meaning and understanding, is inevitably one of the driving forces behind seeking a reading. Okay. So the driving force behind somebody coming to us or ourselves doing a reading. I can get with that. So he goes on, let's see, different concepts of meaning and plenitude. The example, what will my work, love, travel situation be like and why? Great. We can already see here that the metaphysical views held will very much impact on how meaningfully the narrative is received. We can already see that the metaphysical views held will very much impact how. Now we just heard what the person is asking. How will my work, love, travel situation be like, and why? Now, coming from our background, even upon hearing that question, we're already formulating our impressions based on our own filters. I would suggest that the historical development of these three key worldviews, Judeo-Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, and psychophysicalists, seek in their own ways to balance notions that may pull us in different directions in, firstly, seeking to understand our situations, secondly, fill life with abundance, and thirdly, provide a means towards an impulse of integrity and absolute authenticity. And every time I see authenticity, I end up underlining it. So seek their own way to balance our notions. Seek to present the filters that we have. So the first description has sincerity and authenticity. As the reader, myself in that scenario, strives to understand, to reach an understanding of the cards as presented. Okay, so the authenticity strives to reach an understanding of the cards as presented. Okay, and I've got a section here that I mark important, so let's see what this is. Let me move my coffee here. Because reading this, I need lots of coffee, trust me. Important. For the reader, authenticity requires being true to oneself, even while retaining sensitivity and empathy with the person for whom the narrative is intended. Seems obvious, or maybe not. But the thing is that I think why I keep underlining the part about the authenticity is that when I have self-doubt, there's going to be times where we have self-doubt. We're looking at the cards and they're just not making sense. Authenticity to me is the ability to say, this is not making sense. And who knows, the person sitting in front of us may say, that's exactly it. Maybe just that jumble that I'm not comprehending as a reader is a reflection of what the person is feeling. And they didn't even know it and they just need to hear that. So being authentic instead of putting on a show, trying to present myself, as anything other than I am. Because, as I said, I'm a musical director. I'm a musician, I'm a singer, I'm an artist. And sometimes I want to present myself in a particular way. And so finding that authenticity is important to me. So, continuing on, empowering, the increase of understanding or insight, the increase of fullness or engagement, oneself, truthfulness, or authenticity. So empowering. If I can for a moment consider this term frequently used in the world of tarot, I would suggest that the first and foremost it encompasses what I just described. Engagement, truthfulness, and authenticity. The reading or narrative as communicative, as an act assists the intended hearer in any one or more of these, and in that sense ideally leads to steps in the healthy individual to increase light, love, and life. To use a well-worn triplicity that could well be taken as keys with which to approach both tarot and the development of the narrative reading. Great. And so from here, he goes on to, in the book, to 3 different exercises. So from the Hermit's perspective, let's pause for a moment and reflect on the Hermit, a card that in chapter 14 I mentioned would be considered again when we reach this one. So firstly, how would the Hermit manifest its, let's see if I still have it at the top, right? Because I just was doing this, but I may have done a reading with it also. Let's see. And for this book, he uses the Noble Tarot. which I should actually post the Etsy shop for the person where I got this, because it's a really nice reconstruction of the 1659 Noble. Let's see, I thought I'd have it right up top, but no, instead I'm going to sit here and let you look at this wonderful Noble. Oh, just as so. So for the most part with the Marseille, I don't read reversals with it, although as a general rule I do read reversals. Did I actually put the Hermit aside somewhere? You know what? I'm not going to worry about it then. That is my higher power. That is the universe saying, don't worry about it. But I know that he's holding up his lamp and he's looking towards the left. And I may have done something with... No, I'm just curious. Oh, there we go. Okay. Not that this really has anything to do with a whole lot, but then the obsessions kick in. It's like, I gotta find that card now. Okay, so anyway. Let's pause for a moment and reflect on the Hermit, a card that in chapter 14 I mentioned would again... that would be again considered when we reach this one. He is certainly an individual who can be considered from his likely historic basis. Here we are more concerned with how he can be viewed, cutting across time as someone that has perennial value, as of course all cards have. Firstly, how would the Hermit manifest as representative of those three characteristic worldviews presented earlier? What would be his distinct difference if representative of the Judeo-Christian, the Hindu-Buddhist, and the psychophysicalist Waltonschag? I know I'm not pronouncing that correct, but or the worldview. How would he respond to individuals with a distinct Waltonschag to his own? So if this was somebody who is the Judeo-Christian, you know, he's the monk that goes up there, he's contemplating and would be the person who would be trying to find that connection with his higher power so that when he passes, you know, blah, blah, blah. And so I actually sat back meditating on that. The Judeo-Christian, the Hindu-Buddhist, you know, reflecting on, and that's, you know, he would be the Buddhist. He would be sitting up there trying to find that connection, to understand that connection, that oneness to everything, which is what a hermit does, right? Or if this is the atheist who's just felt lost, felt a need to just find themselves, you know, for this limited time we have on earth. What is our meaning then? You know, our legacy is what we leave behind, because that's all that's going to be there, is what we do now. So when using this card in a reading, that means that, you know, it's going to reflect each one of those different views. And it was interesting to just sit back and meditate on the different views. And we go on to how his lamp useful to even those who do not share his views or worldviews, those who literally see the world differently, for whom the gestalt is radically at odds with his own. So the lamp is useful because we have something to learn from all the different cultures, and that's the big thing. You know, when we live inside our own bubble, we hear what we expect to hear. But the tarot, when I lay out a spread, is going to give me the unexpected. I don't know what it's going to present to me. So, looking at the other cultures, the other views, you know, his lamp could be reflecting a light in a way that I've never noticed before. The shadows may be different. Just something could be different. And that's kind of what it's saying, is that just being open to being aware to the different views. Here the element of time and its passage reflect in the Hermit, and what can it tell us about plenitude of life, insights, and authenticity. So essentially looking at the Hermit and trying to give that Hermit a different culture than what we're used to, which means maybe even researching other cultures and saying, well, if this was a Buddhist monk, what would the Hermit say if I was Buddhist? What would the Hermit be saying to me if I was, if I was a Christian, or if I was an atheist? If he was a Christian, if he was a Buddhist, if he was an atheist, what would the Hermit tell us that's different than our culture has already said he's supposed to be? Number 2, consider something you've never undertaken before. Is it possible for you to, and is possible for you to undertake? For example, hot air ballooning, or underwater diving or skiing, water, grass, or snow, or taking a steam train or helicopter ride, and draw 2 cards for how you would likely experience it. I didn't write down on this one what I had done, but for me it was, I've never been in a submersible. I would love to actually go into a submersible of some type that can go down to some depth where I could actually see a crystal blue clear ocean and the sea life around. That would be amazing. And then I drew a king and I drew something else, but it's like, how empowering is that to be able to go down there and, closing my eyes when I pulled these cards and I could actually see, it's like, because the king was there, it's like, hey, I've actually accomplished something. I'm now in the process of doing something amazing. And then it goes on, here, take the time before reading to fully reflect on what it may be like to fully immerse yourself in an imaginative engagement, etc. And it's got a little bit more stuff to it, but it was empowering to, if you think about it, something you haven't done before, but they talk about mindfulness. If you think about it and think about it hard enough, you can make it manifest. Great. So that's kind of like that. It's like sitting there thinking about getting in a submersible. It's like I never even thought about that, but I know that they have rides, at different ocean parks and stuff, and that I could make that manifest. And if I did make it manifest, how would I feel? And then drop the 2 cards. And then 3, resolve. And 3 to resolve, and again, that's increasing our worldview. That's imagining outside of something we've already done. Is I believe what he's asking with that particular exercise. And then number 3, to resolve to offer a 3-card reading to someone, either a friend or online or any bulletin board or forum that has an option to which you're already a member. So I did that. And it was interesting because 3 cards with cups had popped up. I had the 6 of Cups, the Knight of Cups, and the 4 of Cups. And then I was able to have a discussion afterwards. And it was interesting because with the cups, as we were talking about it with the 6 of Cups and the Knight of Cups and the 4 of Cups, and about the Hindu-Buddhist philosophy, reflections, and things like that, we definitely drifted into that area, as opposed to, the cups being, if you're Christian, the cups reflect one thing, etc. But what if, with the 6 of Cups, we have them filled with the water, with that part of the ocean that we give to each other, and it's 6 different moments. And then we have the 4 of Cups with the stability. And you combine the 6 and 4 together, and you have the 10 with the completion of 10 cups. And then we have the Knight of Cups, this enthusiastic person coming along to offer their cup. The cups, and so we started talking about these cups as drops of water in the bigger ocean. We have the 10, the 6 and the 4, these 10 cups, as just having drops of water that we can combine together. And the enthusiasm of the knight holding his cup to offer their water, to want to be able to blend with those other cups in that ocean. A completely different worldview than I would normally have ever thought of until using this as an example. So I really got a lot out of. That was a pretty, really helped with my awareness. And so in chapter 18 here, he goes into spreads also and considering the person around you. What do I have here? I did this again. So, the top card, story, bottom. Okay. For now, let us content ourselves with developing a spread that may be appropriate for different situations. So, a lot of people have their spreads, and I have my favorite few spreads that I always go to. And he's, giving an example of saying, what? Considering a situation, considering the person in front of you, how would you create a unique spread? And how would you create a different spread for different situations? So the example that he gives is a person in charge of a group of people faced with a long-term conflict. They'd like a reading to both better understand the situation and provide a means by which to better engage and how to remain sincere in the situation. Note to self, consider culture, context. Okay, so I have my note there. And then he goes on to let's begin to develop a spread. Mentions in there to remember there's no best method. As I always say to somebody when they say, well, am I wrong? It's like in the tarot, it's what do you feel? It's not right or wrong. If it's right or wrong. If you have that authenticity, if you have that trust in yourself. So anyway, let's approach it from a second perspective. In this case, we have a group of individuals with a conflict. Let's assign to the areas of our reading a surface. We also have the person with responsibilities for groups, so let's also allocate her separate space. So it's interesting here because when I do create a spread, I have a list of keys because I don't even think about doing it intuitively until somebody reminds me. It's like, oh yeah, you don't have to say it's past, present, future, mental, physical, emotional, blah, 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 blah. So this reminded me that, it's always good to, maybe take the situation and create your own spread with it. So he's got the maintaining integrity that was mentioned, encouraging engagement in the tasks at hand, and understanding the nature of the conflict. So he's going to do 3 separate spreads as his suggestion. To the right, we have the space to strive to understand the situation, how to best engage with the task at hand. In order to understand the nature of the conflicts, perhaps 2 or 3 cards may be sufficient. We now face the question as to how to best engage the person in the task at hand. For this, another 3 or 4 cards are drawn. And finally, a card or 2 drawn to guide the person in charge in terms of their inner rectitude, integrity. So, and I did that. It's like, I came up with a scenario where I created my own spread based on a situation. Just because, again, it's like sometimes I get locked into my own path, my own, I have my 3 favorite spreads that I always use. And sometimes, I need to be reminded that it's like, sometimes it's better to just trust yourself and allow yourself to create something different or take a chance with it. So he just goes on this: in every situation may at times be best met in the moment of the spreads that's developed with the developing narrative. In other words, the distinction I initially drew in the two methods described earlier are reconciled the problem at hand, and then okay, blah blah blah. So anyway, the basic difference is that as I was doing these exercises and I went back through, and what I really got out of this is that it made me think about how locked I am into my own views and in my own bubble. And that I actually want to maybe reach out to some people, maybe of other cultures, because I have, and I have. I mean, that's the interesting thing, because moving to online readings, a lot of times you are not able to see the person that you're reading for. It could even be, I've done it through text, or an online stream, who's got a question, who's got an issue, and they'll type it out. And it's funny because that's like true authenticity there, because I am not judging my reading based on the person I'm seeing. I have no choice but to just read the cards as they are. So I really found doing that anonymous readings like that so interesting. So that's what I got out of that chapter there. I would strongly suggest this book. It's a great book to help, break out of whatever molds we may be in. Again, for the most part, I do read the Marseille Tarot. The Rider-Waite Smith, just because, that's the one I started out with. But I find myself drifting more and more to the Marseille in the past couple years. Just because when I don't have Pamela Coleman Smith's picture sitting in front of me, then I really have to be intuitive. I have to trust myself. I have to trust what I'm seeing, and then present that without the comfort of the keywords per se. I mean, there's always the keywords, but what does that card really mean with the other cards around it? And because the way the shapes of the cards are, can I trust that? But now I'm also going to be considering, what are the different what are the different worldviews of it? And I'm just going to keep that hopefully locked in the back of my head. So I just thought that this was interesting. And if people are interested, I can do this for each chapter as we move along. Again, maybe it's not interesting to anybody, but again, I get a lot just from teaching, from talking out loud, to locking stuff in. So with that, I'm just going to say thank you, and please feel free to go to the MyTarot Facebook page. You can go to MyTarot.org. I have links there to the Facebook page, which is the best place to leave questions and things like that. And with that, thank you very much.